I've spent over 1,000 hours vibe coding. I've made about 15 different SaaS projects. Only two of them are actually live. The rest of them really were just me learning. And I've honestly learned a crazy amount over these 1,000 hours. I actually started my journey back in December of 2024, and I've pretty much been doing vibe coding non-stop. And in this video, I'm going to tell you all of the things I've learned that you can apply to actually build SaaS products, mobile apps that actually work but are also completely safe of vulnerabilities. Because one of the issues with vibe coding is that it can make a lot of mistakes. It can expose your API keys, you can get hacked. And there's actually a few horror stories on Twitter right now of developers who have released these products. They've got hacked, they've ended up having all kinds of issues, and you really want to avoid that. So the first thing is that you really need to have a basic understanding of software development and the overall architecture that is commonly used in software development. For example, you need to understand the difference between front end and back end. You also need to understand how deployments work, how hosting works. You might look into things like AWS, or you might look at Heroku. And then on top of that, you need to understand Git. Git is one of the most important things that you can learn when you're doing vibe coding and obviously software development, because when you are building something, you are essentially committing your changes to GitHub, to a repository where all of your code is stored. And then that gets deployed on what's called a production environment. Some people will have a staging environment too. So you basically have two versions of your product. One is for testing and only you and maybe your friends and developers test. And then you have the other one, which is for your actual customers. For example, maybe you update a new feature, you push it to the production environment, and then that crashes and you've got paying customers. That is one of the biggest mistakes you can make in development in general. And then you also need to understand how React works. You also want to understand HTML and CSS, just the very basics, so that you have an idea of how something is displayed. Now, the next thing is your IDE/tool that you use to actually build the product. And if you go on Twitter right now, there's a lot of hype men that are talking about Lovable and Bolt and Replit and just hyping things up and making them out to be very good. But I can tell you truthfully that all of these tools really struggle to produce anything major. When it comes to the back end, often it will fail or it will do really stupid things. We will just get stuck in a loop. And there is a problem right now with vibe coders where you have an idea, you'll go and start making it, you'll get really excited because it looks good in, say, Replit. But then when it comes to actually trying to build it to the point of people using it, setting up the back end, etc., you actually don't get anywhere with it and you end up giving up and start something else. And you end up being in this loop where you're just excited by the idea of launching something, but you never actually launch something. And that's one of the issues I had when I started out. And because I have development experience, fortunately, I was able to pick up on the silly things that these tools were making. So personally, I use Cursor AI pretty much 24/7. Sometimes I use Windsurf. You can try both of them. Windsurf is currently being acquired by OpenAI, so I think that is a very interesting play long term. You then also have GitHub Copilot, and you also have another one called Klein. Klein is basically an extension that goes into your interactive development environment. So you can use Klein in Visual Studio Code, for example. I think you can also use it in Cursor as well. So these are the tools that you want to really be looking at. The next thing comes down to your ability to prompt and explain what it is that you're trying to do whilst also giving it context. If, for example, you're creating a new feature and this feature is struggling to work, and all you say to Cursor is, this feature is not loading properly, Cursor is going to struggle to fix that issue. Sometimes it can see it itself, but most of the time it can't. And if it can see it itself, it will often make mistakes. And so in order for these tools to work their best, as of right now, you need to give as much context as possible, and you need a very good prompt in order for it to fix things. And what I mean by this is, if something is not working, you need to go into the console and you need to see if there's any errors flagging up. And if there are, you need to copy that, paste it into Cursor, and give it a detailed prompt. Say, I've tried to log in and I can see this issue and that issue. I then went to the console and these are the issues showing on the console. What should be happening is X, Y, Z. And when you give that level of prompt to Cursor, your issue will be fixed correctly. It'll be fixed faster. And the likeliness of other things breaking is a lot less because you've given it the prompt. And quite often Cursor can do stupid things because this is AI And although people like to think that AI is smarter than humans, there's a lot of mistakes it will make. A lot of the time, this is called hallucination. And so you just need to be very careful when you're prompting Cursor. And after a while, this type of work can actually become very repetitive because what you're doing is you're just literally going back and forth with an AI agent telling it what to do. And this is where people start to get a bit tired and they start getting lazy. And if you become lazy with what you are prompting these tools to do, you're going to have issues, and the likeliness of you being able to ship a product is a lot less. The next thing to tell you is about documentation. Documentation is so important when it comes to vibe coding. And the way you use documentation is anytime you're doing an audit or analysis of code, you want it to be documented in a .md file. It's basically a markdown file. Anytime you create a new feature, you want to ask Cursor to plan the feature in a document and then track the changes within that document. And what you're actually doing with these documents is you're building up context so that these AI tools can reference what they originally planned to do. The likeliness of them then going on a tangent is much less. And you want to get it so that these AI agents are constantly updating the documentation. For example, I had a brand new feature to roll out recently. It was an AI voice agent into my application. And I basically made it put together a very comprehensive document. It planned out all of the things it needs to consider, the API, the database schema, just everything. And then every couple of prompts, I would ask it to go and update the document if it hasn't already. It would keep doing that. And so then when it came to working on new features or coming back to it, I was able to reference what was in that document. And this again has enabled me to have high quality output from these AI tools. And you definitely need to be doing documentation. Now, the next thing to tell you is probably the most important thing that you need to do when it comes to vibe coding, because this can cause havoc. This can also cause financial loss. If you go and release a product and you've not done code reviews, you've not reduced your technical debt, you've not looked at whether your API keys are exposed, you're going to have a lot of big issues, because there are people out there right now, mostly developers, who hate vibe coders. They hate the idea of using AI. They're against it. And so they like to go out and look at some of these projects that were vibe coded, and they like to take them down. They like to go and play around and cause havoc with their API keys. Like I said at the start of the video, there are people who've ended up getting huge hosting bills because some developer has found a vulnerability and exploited it. So to do code reviews, technical debt, and look at vulnerabilities, you need to look at tools like CodeRabbit, or you can look at another one called Code. Basically, these will look through your entire code base and they will give you a bunch of issues that they are concerned about, vulnerabilities. And what will happen is every time you make a commit to your GitHub repo, these tools will look at those changes and they will advise you if you've got any vulnerabilities or anything major that needs to be fixed. And so for me personally, to lock everything down, I actually use CodeRabbit. And then I also use Claude 4 to constantly audit the code base, find any potential vulnerabilities, put them into a markdown file, and then execute on those changes so that the chance of being hacked or any major issues are significantly reduced. You have to go through this every time you're launching a new project or feature. I'm going to be honest, it's very boring. There's nothing exciting about reviewing code and then making changes and all that, especially if it's back end. Because for me personally, I like to see things visually. And so I understand why people might often miss this or CBA to even do it. But you need to do this. It's so important. And if you don't, you're going to be screwed. Now, the final thing to tell you is that speed is key. When it comes to vibe coding, building a startup, doesn't make a difference. The key goal that you have is defining an MVP, getting it shipped, getting people to use it, and getting feedback. You need to do that as quickly as possible, whilst obviously considering everything else I've shown you, like code reviews, code quality, and just building a good product. But this is super important that you act fast, because you're in a race right now with other people who are going to beat you to it. And at the same time, what you don't want to do is spend, say, 3 months building something, you then launch it and find that no one wants it. And that is one of the issues right now in this space, is that people are creating these software companies and these mobile apps, and they don't solve problems. They're just stupid, gimmicky apps that nobody really wants. And so when you're building a startup in general, your number one goal is to ship fast, get feedback, get proof of concept, iterate, and then scale. So guys, let me know if this video is helpful. If you have any questions, comment down below. Also check out the link in my bio. It's my holding company. You can see the projects that I'm working on right now. And I am actively looking to partner with new founders, whether that be investing, whether that be co founding something, scaling your startup, whatever it is. Reach out to me. I just want to have conversations with people in this space right now because I would genuinely love to have more conversations with people. This is a very exciting time. There are tons of opportunities out there. We're in a bit of a gold rush right now. And that is why I'm going to do all I can to make as many videos as possible over the next few weeks, show you guys what I'm learning, what I'm building, and hopefully that helps a bunch of people along the way.